Saints Insider crew back in our studio for the first time in more than a week, but not much has changed in Saints land as the Saints still trying to answer questions about their offense, about their communication, and about whether they can actually make something out of this 2023 season. This is the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, October the 25th. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. And boys, it's a new week and same old story. Feels like.
Yeah, well, it just kind of feels like Groundhog Day, like we've been in this for 2 years now.
That's a really strong hook for a show, by the way. Like, keep listening to us talk about the same old problems.
Well, but like here's the thing, though. This has been the same story over and over again. And yet, two of you guys picked the Saints last week, which was like, you didn't see it coming. So actually, before we really get started here,
Man.
We
came prepared.
Yeah. You guys drank the Kool-Aid.
Oh, my God. I'll take this.
You drank the Kool-Aid, ate the cheese.
Right?
Wow.
There you go. Yeah.
I do like cheese.
Thanks,
Rod,
man. I appreciate this.
We'll hook you up, too, because even though you made the right call, nobody should go thirsty.
We're not doing Colts predictions on this show, but
man,
Kool-Aid tastes good. Yeah.
I drank the Kool-Aid in preseason, man. So
You did.
It's been
What was it, Jeff? 28 media members and one picked the Saints to have a losing record?
correct.
And they still may get a winning record. I mean, it's
Right.
not – we're not even halfway through the season yet, but we did drink some Kool-Aid.
Lost 4 of their last 5, so they're not trending in the right direction.
They are not. They are not. If you want your finances trending in the right direction, you can check out Saints Insider sponsor, Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. I'm kind of hungry, Luke. I appreciate that. We're going to rattle this plastic.
Kind of
like,
cheese
I wish I could take some credit for this, but it's our guy Robert Young behind the glass. Had a great idea. So thank you for that, Robert. We appreciate it. For those who are listening, Zach and Jeff definitely drank the Kool-Aid and picked the Saints last week, so we got to honor that and give them some Kool-Aid out here on the show this morning.
To be fair, Rod, they came way closer to winning that game than they deserved.
That's true. But, I mean, Luke and I, and on the show I actually picked the Saints as well, but I ended up changing my pick later in the week because we didn't know the status of Trevor Lawrence at the time. But, I mean, this is a game that we all sort of had our stories written at some point, and then all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, the Saints are going to come back and win this game, huh? And they didn't. I mean, there was, obviously the Foster Moreau missed a pass in the end zone that could have possibly tied the game, and I don't know if the Saints would have gone for 2 or not and tried to win it or not. But, I mean, they fought back and got in it, but for the most part, it was the same old thing that we've been talking about for, like Luke said, back since last year this time.
I really don't think Dennis Allen was going to go for 2 in retrospect. Just doesn't seem like something he would do.
I don't know. I think just with the flow of the game, I absolutely think he would have. They had the game in their grasp right there. So yeah, I know he is a conservative-minded coach, and he does a lot of conservative things. But I think in that moment, yeah, you would have had to. I would have. I truly think that he actually would have done the same in that moment. You'll never know.
Yeah, I think you would have had to.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have basically been stealing that game. And I don't think they would have the confidence to win that in overtime. What was there, like 30 seconds left or something like that, roughly?
About that, the Jags would have had a brief chance. I think they had a couple timeouts.
Yeah, but I think more than likely your odds would say you win it with the 2 point.
The other thing, Rod, you changed your pick when you found out Trevor Lawrence was playing. Didn't seem like he was hurt at all. I mean, he ran for like 60 yards in that game, showed burst. He wasn't limping. I kind of, like, the Jags pulled the oop on me, and I led to me drinking Kool-Aid.
I'll say that. I think that the Jags are maybe the best team the Saints have played all around. I mean, they were impressive to me. And like you mentioned, you had a very good point going into that game. The Saints caught them at a very good time. I mean, they were missing a couple of key starters, short week. They've been in London for 2 weeks. just had a big win, a divisional opponent, and yet they still were able to win that game. So that was impressive to me. I think that team's going to be a force down the road.
Yeah,
I go so far to say that the past two teams they played were probably the best two teams they played.
Yes.
The Houston Texans, 4 days before that, I thought they were good, but I thought the Jags were even better.
Remember when we thought the AFC South was going to be a good draw? Remember that in preseason? Everybody was like, wow, they got the AFC South. That's terrible. And
Yeah,
now
but
they lost the last two.
Having said that, I mean, they played 7 games. How many playoff teams have they played? 1? Maybe the Bucks end up winning the division.
No, that's the point.
I mean,
it's still the best teams they played.
Yeah.
Those two teams.
But that's sad. I mean, you're 3-4 against as weak of a schedule as you possibly could.
Well, I
play.
think that's why fans understand this isn't good enough. I think Saints fans are intelligent, man. They get it. They've seen good teams. They've seen 13-3 teams recently, and they know this isn't it. So even if, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, they have a chance here to cobble together a couple of wins and get back above 500, it's still, they know they're not an elite team and not even close to it right now and can't compete with the elite teams in the league. So what are we doing here? So you finish the year at 9-8. Where's the vision? Where's this franchise going? I think that's the source of the disenchantment right now. It's beyond just this season.
Yeah, we had an opportunity to actually sit on our couches and watch some football this weekend since the Saints played Thursday. And you watch the Sunday night game, Dolphins and Eagles, and even the Monday night game, the Niners and the Vikings, whom the Saints play in a couple weeks. It did not seem like it was the same level of football. Like you look at the Saints and then you look at that and you go, they're not going to compete with those teams.
Well, I mean,
we'll see.
I still think the Saints could compete with anybody, right? It's just that because I think their defense is good enough to match up with teams like the 49ers or the Cowboys, or maybe not the Eagles because that's like kind of their kryptonite type of team. But I still think that they would be competitive with just about anybody. It's just I think their offense is not good enough to make that defense relevant, and so they can compete with the better teams in the NFL, but they can also lose games that are just really flummoxing. You don't understand. They could lose to the Colts this weekend. I think they're probably a better team than the Colts. The Colts have their backup quarterback, but they could lose to them because they could lose any game they play. Any NFL team could lose any game they play, but I mean it's especially true with a team like the Saints that can't consistently put points on the board.
Yeah, that's well put, because it's not that they can't compete, but those teams were coming up with big plays on third downs.
Right.
Those teams were coming up with big
Right.
plays defensively when they needed it, and the Saints just have not shown the ability to do that.
This team reminds me so much, and frankly, last year's team, of the Jim Haslett era. That's what I think we're seeing here. Those Jim Haslett teams before Katrina could beat anybody in the league, and they did. They beat the Rams when they were the greatest show on turf. They'd rise up and play a really good game and tease you with their talent. I mean, they had a ton of talent. The 2002 team had a bunch of Pro Bowlers and All-Pros. Deuce McAllister, Aaron Brooks was a big-time talent that could make every throw, kind of like Derek Carr, but then he wasn't consistent. And then they'd lose, 2 or 3 games. The consistency isn't there, and it's just a carbon copy of that. And they all end up around 500 because they can't maintain the consistency needed. And that's the difference between the elite teams and those Saints teams that we've seen that were 13-3. They might play poorly and grind out a win here and there, but they still won the game. They didn't beat themselves, and the Saints are beating themselves offensively, and it's so widespread, the dysfunction. I don't see any hope of fixing it this season, mid-season. I don't know if they do get it fixed at all, ever.
And Jeff mentioned consistency. That was the one word that Dennis Allen consistently said on Friday. He just kept talking about how they have to find that consistency to be good, and they haven't found it. And I'm not sure if they're going to find it. I mean, I think this is a team that's just going to be up and down like this throughout the year. And, when it comes to the second week in January, they're probably going to be either 9-8 or 8-9. I just think that's what this team is.
Yeah. Saints Insider Podcast is brought to you by Bang Plus. We are here every Wednesday and Friday when we have a normal Sunday week, flip things around for Thursday games. But we encourage you to subscribe to the SaintsOnNOLA.com YouTube channel and sign up for notifications. That way when we're live, when we have new videos, new podcasts. You can also follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Another supporter of the Saints Insider Podcast. Do you guys know what happens when you leave Kool-Aid out? Like, I assume it ferments, right? and it becomes wine.
Wow.
So
That's impressive.
Yeah, Ralph's Market cordially invites you to its fall wine gala Friday, November the 3rd at La Berge Casino and Hotel in Baton Rouge. Dress in your Great Gatsby best and sample 80 wines and hors d'oeuvres. It's the Ralph's Market Fall Wine Gala, November the 3rd. You can get tickets now at ralphsag.com.
Do you have a tuxedo with tails?
I was going to ask, Luke feels like the person most likely here to have a Great Gatsby outfit. I don't know.
I think he's worn it to a few games. He's worn it
That's
that
probably
outfit
true.
to a game or two.
It's this hipster sickness that I have. I can't help myself. I've got to look like I was born in 1903.
It's the Roaring 20s again.
That's right.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go with the water to wine transition there, but the Kool-Aid to wine worked too.
The Saints need to turn water into wine. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Which is what they would be doing if they get this thing turned around. So.
Jeez. Yeah, well, speaking of that, let's talk about the offense because it's still the biggest problem on this team. Like the defense, pass rush, we're going to talk about that too because that was an issue. But like, is there any reason to believe that they can find something to turn this around? Luke, they've had communication issues. Derek Carr's yelling at Chris Olave, who, by the way, we'll talk about that too. The red zone problems. They did find something with tempo offense the other night. Is there like a light at the end of the tunnel there?
I mean, I think that's something they could go to periodically. Obviously, they can't run it the entire game, right? But they could go to it when they need a jump start or when they want to get out to a fast start and just kind of go no huddle from the beginning. It's a little bit different than the normal Saints offense we see where they're changing personnel over and over again on a given drive. Where you're rocking with the same personnel and you're just going and you're on the attack and you're making the defense react to what you're doing. I think there's some elements of that you can take and just kind of pepper into a game to get you going. Because obviously, they looked really good in that. And I was talking to somebody after the game. They're like, with the guys we have on the outside, with the speed we have, this is something that can work for us. And they wanted to see the Saints do more of that. We'll see. We'll see if they kind of add it in. We'll see if they kind of take this long break between that Thursday night game and this Sunday's game against Indianapolis and try to incorporate some of the things where they've actually been successful this season. But, obviously with this team, it goes beyond moving the ball between the 20s. This whole thing will come down to whether they can figure out what to do in the red zone. And that was obviously came up to bite him again at the end of the game on Thursday.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's hard to see that being a panacea, Jeff. Let's run tempo and that's it. And if it is, then maybe it's even more damning that they didn't think of it before.
Well, I think part of that is just that Derek Carr in those situations is playing very aggressively. He knows he has to be aggressive. They're in catch-up mode, so he's not thinking as much, I think. And I think when I've watched him on tape and when you see some of the criticisms of him, he just seems a little hesitant and unsure of himself. And that's when he gets into trouble, like on the pick six, where he kind of pump faked and then threw late over the middle. But in these instances where he's in that tempo, he's coming back, hitting his back foot and firing it. So maybe there's something to that a little more than just the tempo. It's just that he knows there's no tomorrow and I've got to just let it rip. And I'm just not sure. The answer isn't going to be tempo the whole game. Andres Pete would keel over dead if he tried to do that. But I do think there's some promise there. But I just keep going back to it's a little fool's gold because the key situations, third down and red zone, that's where you make your living, and they're awful in those situations. And it's been that way for a bunch of weeks now. So it's a little bit of, I don't know. It's driving between the 20s. Defenses sometimes let you do that. They're letting you get those underneath things, letting you drive, and then once you get down to pay dirt, that's when they tighten up. And I'll believe it when I see it.
So the answer obviously is to run 4 verticals from the 25-yard line every time you get close, right?
Yeah, I thought they should have. Going back to that series, I thought they should have run the ball at least once there. They had them spread out.
Had 2 timeouts. They could have done it.
Yeah, give it to Alvin or something. To me, that was the big. They had time to use, and that sequence was pretty bad.
They ended up throwing the ball, 55 times?
Yeah,
Yeah.
55.
Yeah,
it
well,
really was 59 dropbacks. He had 3 scrambles and a sack.
Yeah, I don't think this team, most NFL teams aren't built to win games that way, but especially this team. And, they'll have to be able to run the ball better. And we've kind of talked about that throughout the year, too, and they just haven't been doing it. Something I thought was interesting is one of the Jacksonville defensive players, I can't remember who it was, but he mentioned how, he thinks that Derek Carr just, the game plan is, he likes to check down, so they just were not going to give up anything deep and just make sure they come in and make tackles on these short passes to Kamara, and that was kind of their game plan going into the game, and, it ended up, working for them.
I mean, the other factor here is that they wouldn't have been forced to throw the ball 55 times. They wouldn't have been in comeback mode. The Jaguars gifted you 2 fumbles in the first quarter. You've just got to. I mean, not only did they not do anything with it, they were down 14-3 after 17 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and one of those fumbles came inside the 20.
Yeah, that's how they got the 3.
Right. This has been a team though that has kind of failed to capitalize on things all season long, and we have to keep going back to their failures inside the 20, their failures to put the ball in the red zone or in the end zone from there, and I know all of us watched that JT O'Sullivan breakdown, but I mean there were plays to be made there. Yeah, there was one of the incomplete passes down there in the red zone was Derek missing a open Rashid Shaheed twice. He came open twice on the play. And, he ended up throwing it too high for him. Shaheed made a great catch, but it was in the back of the end zone. He couldn't get his feet down. And then obviously Foster, they would have had a touchdown to tie the game or take the lead if they decided to go for 2 at the end, and Foster dropped it there. I mean, there's plays to be made. Guys aren't making the plays. And then they're compounding that by mixing in some really questionable play calls down there.
Yeah.
I mean, how many goal line fades need to fall incomplete before they stop running that play? I mean, it's clearly to me not a strength of Derek Carr's. That 4th down ball was, I mean, I don't know how Olave ever would have had a chance to catch that ball. It was too far inside. It was basically, it looked like it should have been picked off. I think they need to really take this time to reevaluate what they're doing down there, because what they're doing right now doesn't work, and maybe get Taysom Hill more involved. I think their only red zone touchdown they scored in this game, I think, if I remember correctly, was Taysom Hill on 4th and goal, taking a QB power in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the answer is once you get inside that 10, just give it to Taysom and let him be a battering ram. I don't know. But, you mentioned Olave, and the famous, now infamous video is Carr yelling at Olave on the sideline after a play in which Olave wasn't even supposed to get the ball, and he's apparently right about that, but from everything we've been able to figure out, he was supposed to run his route harder to clear space for Taysom Hill underneath, and that's what Derek Carr was upset about. But leaving that one aside, because that's just one play, is there something going on with Chris Olave? I mean, we had the arrest for speeding the other day for a reckless operation of a vehicle, I guess it is, going 70 miles an hour in a 35 in Kenner. The video's out there, all this stuff. But it just seems like the guy's head is not in it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair just from what we can see. We can see body language. I think his body language has been pretty poor throughout this season. I don't think I think that's absolutely fair criticism with him. And then on top of that, it's some of these like mental errors where, maybe it's not all on Olave all the time, but there's multiple moments in that game where you see Carr throwing somewhere where he's expecting Olave to be, and Olave is not there, and it just does not seem like it's like he's kind of taken that next step. And I don't know if he was kind of feeling himself after that rookie season that he had. But this is not like the player that we saw last year. Like last year, I feel like he was where he was supposed to be all the time. And maybe it's because they've brought in the new quarterback, whatever the case is, but it's just not looking that way this year.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a common theme we're seeing here, is this lack of attention to detail. Him not running that route out. Nobody was right in that situation. Derek Carr was definitely out of line jumping on him. That should never happen from your starting quarterback like that, on the middle of the field, screaming in front of the opponent.
The opponent was mic'd up, and it got caught on.
Yeah,
NFL
they see that,
tape.
and they see panic and chaos. I mean, that's exactly what they see. never let them see that. So, in my opinion, Derek Carr was way out of line, but Chris Olave's got to run the route out too. So, this attention to detail, I mean, we saw it in the J.T. O'Sullivan video where he didn't run that one little hook route. He kind of stutter stepped and the ball went flying past him and he wasn't ready for it. It's just those little small things, but was a hallmark of the Breeze Payton era, attention to detail. And it's widespread across this offense. Small little things, Alvin Kamara not quite running outside with quite the speed he needs, maybe missing a pass protection assignment. I mean, it's not one person. It's a number of players, and it's that attention to detail that's missing. So we can parse and point fingers at each individual player, but that's what's going on here. And it's the hallmark of dysfunctional teams and losing teams, and that's why I don't think it's going to get fixed.
And even on the body language, I mean, it wasn't just Olave. There was a play when Rasheed was the same way, sort of animated because he didn't get the ball.
There's a couple
There
of
was
plays
another
like
pass
that.
Yeah, those
when
guys are frustrated.
Yeah, Michael Thomas was like clapping his hand, like, throw me the ball because he was open, and Carr didn't see him, but he went the other way or something. But so yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of little things, and it's all adding up to this one big thing.
It kind of brings to mind a famous Jim Mora line that you wrote about this morning. This is October 25th is the anniversary of coulda, woulda, shoulda, and it feels a little bit like that. Except I'd be shocked if they won 9 in a row like that team did.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that they went on that run after Morris thing. I looked it up and I was like, okay, yeah, so
it worked.
Yeah, it worked. His speech worked, and I don't know if Dennis Allen has that type of speech in him or if this team has that type of moxie in them. But this is the anniversary of that speech, and the funny thing about it is when he made that speech after that 49ers loss, the game was very similar. The Saints lost 24-22, didn't score an offensive touchdown, had 5 Morton Anderson field goals, scored on a block punt return. So it's eerily similar to how bad this team is offensively. So we'll see if they can get it turned around, and I don't know if anybody up here thinks they will, but we'll see.
I don't, man. I feel like I've always been this like optimist about the teams I covered.
No way, really?
This team is killing my optimism. No, I'm saying this team is killing my optimism.
Kool-Aid here.
I'm having a really hard time just seeing how this is going to work. I want to believe that this collection of players they've amassed, who we all have seen how talented they are and what they can do, we all want to believe it'll work. Like, I don't think that Alvin Kamara is a guy who on a lot of other teams would average 3.5 yards per carry like he is here. I think he's a really good player, and it's not happening here. I think Michael Thomas is still a really good player. I think we've seen that out of him. I think we've seen Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are explosive, talented players. I think we've seen a lot better out of Derek Carr. And then you put all these guys together, and it is not working remotely. And you think, like, it's got to work, right? They got to find something that's going to make this work. But, like, 7 games, we've seen nothing. We've seen maybe, like, a quarter here and there. But, like, nothing that's going to suggest that, yeah, this is going to happen. They're going to flip the switch and go and start being a functioning offense. I've like no confidence in that right now.
We started using the community tab on our NOLA.com our Saints on NOLA.com YouTube page, and we put up a poll and 200 votes or something of asking people during this little 10-day break they have this mini bye, what should they do? Should they replace Pete Carmichael as play caller? Should they replace Derek Carr as quarterback? Should they do both of those things, or should they do nothing? And of the 200 people who responded, I think 7% said do nothing. The most common response was replace Pete Carmichael as play caller. Do nothing was by far the last choice, okay? But what did the Saints do? They did nothing. And that's not a surprise. I mean, I don't think any of us thought they were going to do that, Dunk, but it just goes to show you the fans' frustration, and you almost want to shake them and say, do something to fix this.
Yeah, I don't think that change is going to happen mid-season, and if it does, I think they would wait till like a bye week, see how it plays out. That's just not Dennis Allen's MO. I know internally they have talked about things like that, but I don't know if that's going to fix it. I mean, I do think if Ronald Curry were inserted, say you went to Curry as play caller, they could improve in that area. I think that's possible, but I still think the things we talked about earlier is the overriding problem is the discipline and attention to detail. And I'm not sure Ronald Curry's going to fix that. Ronald Curry did speak to the team at halftime of that game, gave a speech to the team. They did play better in the second half. So he's invested, and certainly a guy that's talented and has the chops. But I think it's more, if you go into this offseason, and we don't know how the season's going to play out, but looking long term, you may have to just overhaul the complete offense and get a whole new system in and a whole new way of trying to move the football in the modern NFL. I think that's probably the answer more than midseason play caller change.
And I don't know that there's one fix out there, Rod. If there was, maybe they'd try it. But like, I just start to wonder if Jeff says it's not Dennis Allen's MO. Dennis Allen's MO is not working. It's never worked in the NFL. This is probably the most talented team he's ever had, and it's still not working.
And that's why I feel like you have to do something different because, I mean, you're doing the same thing, getting the same results. I mean, you just can't do that. The fans are booing the Saints in the Superdome, like
after one series.
Booing them off the field. I mean, like resounding boos. I don't know why people call it a chorus of boos. Chorus seems too positive.
Yeah, so I mean, just the fact that you're hearing that on Sundays, I mean, you have to do something different. If it's just even if you don't fire Pete Carmichael, if you just keep him on board as a consultant or whatever you want to call him, and I think you do have to give Ron Curry a shot at calling plays. But again, like Jeff said, I mean, it all comes down to these details that they're not paying attention to. It's just too many little things, and until you fix that, the problem's not going to be fixed. I mean, changing the play caller probably doesn't work, but at least it appeases your fan base, and it may stop the boos for one quarter anyway.
It kind of reminds me, it was last year the Colts brought in Jeff Saturday.
Right.
They won one game, and then it just backslid to what it was.
Right.
I think that's what would probably happen. There'd be a little initial sugar rush, and then it would go back to what it was.
Sugar rush.
Yeah. I mean, look, I did hear some stuff this week that was troubling to me. Like, they did some, and we haven't reported this, but we can say it on the podcast. Like during the crisis a couple weeks ago, they did an eval of the. This is what somebody in the building told me. An eval of the Microsoft Surface tablets that the players have. And there was like 30 players that haven't opened their tablet during the week. So that's the problem. That's the attention to detail.
I just want to repeat that, or have you repeat that, Jeff. I mean, 30 players out of what is that including practice squad guys? You got 68. Anyway, about half the team isn't even looking at their tablets. And you think about listen, we know these guys put their bodies on the line and stuff. That's the stuff that sticks with fans when these guys are getting paid this much money, tickets cost this much, concessions and parking, and I'm paying all this money, and these guys don't give a care.
Well, and I think that we saw the reaction from some of the leaders on the team, right? We heard, I think that's exactly what Alvin Kamara was referencing. I know that how I prepare. Remember that comment? Yep. I know how Mike T prepares. That was directed at what we're talking about. And I heard Demario Davis went off on this. So until they get that fixed, and that's incumbent upon the leaders on the team, the coaching staff, and really each player, when they say look in the mirror, that's what they're talking about. But I just don't have confidence that once you have this short-term kind of, we get it right and we beat the Patriots, then it just seems to backslide again. The discipline and attention to detail goes away again. So that's why I'm not as optimistic, because I just feel like that's a bad sign, a very bad sign.
Yeah. Another bad sign, I think, kind of moving on to the defense, which had its own issues on Thursday night, especially in the first half. They had they had no sacks, and they had one quarterback pressure in that game. And we've praised this defense in a lot of ways. They deserve it. They played better in the second half until they didn't. But that's a big problem if you can't get that fixed. And Jacksonville had injuries on its offensive line too, Luke.
This is like the foundation of the Saints' defense's success in the last 5 years or 6 years, or however long Dennis Allen's had them playing at a high level. Is they build everything on that front, on being able to stop the run and getting after the passer. Everything else is dependent on that. When that part is not going, and specifically getting after the passer, I think they did an okay job against the run. Obviously, Etienne had the 2 touchdowns, whatever, but when you're not able to get after the passer and you're playing all this man coverage in the back and match coverage and all this stuff. That's you're asking a lot out of that secondary. Talented secondary though it is, you're asking a lot. And I think that's where you start to see this kind of start to fall apart a little bit defensively. It is so important for them to get after the passer with 4 guys. It's why they invest so many resources in that defensive line. When it's not happening, we see stuff like we saw in the first half this week, the first half last week against Houston. They are a beatable defense if they're not able to affect the passer. I think that's true across the board for NFL teams, but this defense in particular. They're at their best when they're forcing the passer into making bad decisions, bad throws, negative plays, 3rd and longs, and they're not getting that done right now.
3 of their last 6 first-round picks are defensive linemen, I think. So they've invested in it. And like Luke said, Rod, if that part of the defense is not getting the job done, it overstresses everything else.
It does. And, you talk about obviously Peyton Turner's not here, and not playing, and Marcus Davenport's hurt. But, they have some guys that are missing. Davenport's not here, obviously, but some guys who they drafted that didn't pan out, and it's starting to kind of catch up with him. I think Cam Jordan's, he's obviously getting a little older. So they'll have to do better on that end too. But to the defense's credit, I think for the most part, they've done better in the second half of these past 2 games. They sort of tightened up and got things fixed. They did give up the big play toward the end of the Jags game that ended up killing them. But, they'll have to be better on that side because, as we've been saying, this defense has to carry this team because the offense is just not carrying their share of the load right now.
I do want to point out that touchdown that both of us have referenced at the end of the game, 44-yard game winner, that also came on an incredibly short field. They have some issues right now in the kicking game. I think Lou Hedley's got a great story, but you cannot be in a tie game in the final 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. You cannot be punting it 35 yards or whatever it was. A short punt, low punt. It's like a 35-yard punt should not be returnable, or however long.
I think it was 39 yards with a 9-yard return, and honestly, that return could have been longer. The Saints actually covered the kick pretty well.
Right, but this is the Jaguars started on their own 46 or on the Saints 46. They started in plus territory. You got a 20-24 all game inside of the final 4 minutes.
It's not like they were kicking from the back of their own end zone.
Right. This is I don't know. Their issues are just so deep, and then it's just the game's on the Saints defense's hands. They play quarters coverage, and it's kind of on Tyrann Mathieu, who I still think is a good player, but it's on him one-on-one with Christian Kirk, probably the Jaguars' best wide receiver, who's running an option route. I think that's a mismatch, and Kirk beat him. He gave him a little shoulder shake to the outside and beat him to the inside, and there was nobody there to bring him down. So, but all these issues get compounded when the kicking game is falling apart, and the offense. I think that was a series where Carr was yelling at Olave. Maybe I don't know. I think they went 3 and out.
Might have been the series. I don't know. Yeah.
Either way, it's all these.
It all melts together.
Everything's all kind of compounding together, and then the defense is put in a compromised situation, and it can't consistently bail this offense out and the kicking game.
This is the Saints Insider. We'll wrap things up here. We'll be back on Friday with a full preview of Saints versus Colts, which I got to point this out. My 8-year-old pointed this out because I told him it was a rematch of Super Bowl 44, and he goes, "Oh, well, the winner will be 4-4." And I said, "That's pretty good. And you could do this job." So anyway, that's just a little nugget for before Friday. But real quick, let's talk about that game just for a minute. We talked about, Anthony Richardson's not going to play, and the Saints have this problem with mobile quarterbacks. Maybe that's a break. Gardner Minshew led this offense to more than 400 yards against a very good Cleveland Browns defense on Sunday. They lost the game. They had some turnovers, things like that. This is not exactly a spot where you can go in and think you're going to feast on a weakling.
Well, I don't think the Saints can't
feast on anybody.
Exactly. I think if the Saints are ever going into a game at this stage of the season thinking like, okay, it's our time to eat, they have some problems because they need to get their house in order. I think I even asked Dennis Allen about Gardner Minshew on Monday. he's like, it's about us right now. We got to get our own stuff in order before we really start diving into schematics and personnel for the opposing team. I will say though that I think Gardner Minshew is a good NFL player, Mississippi guy, Rod, who is capable of putting together games like that. But I also think he's flawed, and we saw it last year. Shane Steichen was the Eagles' offensive coordinator. Gardner Minshew started against the Saints, and they beat that dude up. They were a bad team at that point too, and he got nothing going against them. Marshawn Lattimore had a pick 6 in that game. I think Philly scored 10 points. So they've matched up pretty well against him in the past. I think they beat him up too when he played with Jacksonville.
Jacksonville, yeah.
So, I'm not worried about him, but the Saints absolutely have to be because, as we keep saying, they keep playing on these razor-thin margins.
Yeah, I think they'll face. We'll get greater depth on Friday, but it's probably the best offensive line they faced. So I think it's incumbent on that defensive line to get after them, because, like Luke said, Minshew he'll throw it in there and throw it up for grabs, and he's turnover prone. I think they have to get back to that, get back to some takeaways, and they're going to have to stop the run because they got 2 really good backs. But they're going to. The Saints should have their A game, whatever that A game is. If they don't have an A game in this after the crisis mode they're in, I don't know if they're going to be much hope for this team. So I expect them to, rally the troops, circle the wagons, and go all in. And this is a team that, frankly, they should beat. But at this stage, I don't know if we can say that about anybody.
It's desperation mode, but we thought we would have seen that before from the Saints.
Yeah, we had now or never on the front page today for the Pelicans season, and I feel like that's what this is for the Saints on Sunday against the Colts. Just coming off of this break, they've talked about resetting and, back to the drawing board and fixing all the kinks. If they don't do it now, when are they going to do it?
We will talk about that on Friday, Saints versus Colts preview episode, coming up on these same channels and social media feeds. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Sign up for notifications. Give us a like, thumbs up, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends. And we will find out, Saints-Colts, find out more about it on Friday. And our predictions in the end, find out who's eating that cheese. You guys eating the cheese?
I probably will be.
Depends on what kind of cheese this is.
Colby Jack, I
find
think?
out from Robert.
Yeah.
Is this Gouda? What are we
Come
dealing
on,
with
man.
here?
Colby Jack, man.
Oh, okay.
Come on,
All right.
man.
Colby,
Good
I'll eat some
stuff.
Colby Jack.
All right.
Good.
We will find out on Friday, Saints versus Colts. That's the next episode for Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan, for Norman Bell and Robert Young behind the glass. We're brought to you by Bank Plus. Our thanks also to Ralph's Market. Check out that wine gala on November the 3rd. This is Saints Insider. See you next time.